post it later to our website for those who have missed it, or if you'd like to read it again or listen to it again. On the call today, we do have majority of the Colorado Broadband Office staff, so people from community engagement, GIS team, the communications teams, Executive Director Brandy Ryder is also on the call with us. And I'm going to actually take a moment to let our programs team introduce themselves. They will be the ones running the webinar today. So I'm going to let them jump on and introduce themselves. Kendall, if you want to go first.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for being here. I am Kendall Kramer with CBO. I am a program specialist for the federal funding side of things for CBO.
Ali, do you want to go next?
Yep, and my name is Haytham Ali, and I go by Ali. I'm one of two project managers that'll be project managing the CPF applications and programs. And thank you very much for joining us today.
And my name is Michael Murphy. I'm the other project manager. I work along with Ali, so we'll look forward to working with you guys.
All right, thanks, guys. So again, the purpose of the call today is to review the letters of intent that we received this summer to apply for capital projects funds. We'll get into that in detail here in just a moment. But this webinar really is to talk about what we learned from those letters of intent and how we're going to develop the grant process to apply for capital projects fund. We know there's a lot of other grant programs out there, both federal and state, but today the purpose of today's call is to focus on capital projects fund. We are going to talk about programmatic, compliance, and technical considerations. We were able to put together a little more guidance so you can start to understand what we'll be looking for in the grant process. We will take questions. We'll have a decent amount of time for questions and answers. So we do ask that you hold those questions until we are done with the presentation, because we might be able to answer some of them as we present, but we will leave plenty of time to do that at the end. So as many of you are aware, the governor's office, Governor Polis, has tasked the Colorado Broadband Office to lead the state's effort to bring 99% of Colorado households high-speed internet by the end of 2027. This summer, we opened a month-long window to accept letters of intent to apply for grants through Advance. The purpose of the LOIs is to give our office a high-level idea of broadband needs from our communities, our internet service providers, other government agencies and stakeholders. We want to make sure we're providing opportunities to listen, receive feedback and input, as well as partner with our stakeholders as we put together our plans really to address Colorado's need for internet so that everyone can thrive. Colorado will be receiving millions in federal funds from various programs over the next few years. As we said, Capital Projects Fund is the first bucket of money we will be receiving. So the LOI process that we opened up this summer was about a month-long window where we asked any interested party who might want to apply for grants to just give us a high-level idea of their needs and what they might want to do for projects. Some of them were pretty detailed, others were very high level. We understand everyone's in a different place in the process. We received 87 LOIs that impact nearly every county in the state. So that showed us there's a lot of need. If we were to fund all of the proposals we got, just to give everyone an idea, it would be about $2.4 billion. So there's a lot of need. There's a lot of projects out there that need to be funded. And so we are in this webinar today going to talk about just how we're prioritizing things and the type of projects that we're going to be looking for, because we will need to smartly deploy that money. And yeah, actually this time I'm good. I'll hand it over to Kendall to start talking about the program overview.
Thank you, Lauren. And again, thank you everyone for being here today. Our objective of today's webinar is to equip our applicants with useful information to submit a complete application that meets the program's requirements. Again, as Lauren noted, this webinar will focus specifically on the CPF program. And if you have questions about any of the other programs, feel free to reach out to any of us here at CBO. We'll provide our contact information.
You're more welcome to
we'll provide our contact information later in the webinar. And this information that we share today, it is informed by the most current federal guidance from the Treasury. However, we would like to note that that guidance can change if Treasury chooses to do so. And we will keep you aware of that if they do issue any new guidance. The state application that we are developing that we anticipate to have available by early 2023 will also be developed according to this guidance. And that guidance is also available online as well, and we can share that with you. The CBO is looking to fund projects that help achieve Governor Polis's goal of connecting 99% of households to high-speed internet by 2027. So this is a very important initiative that we're striving to help achieve. We will also be investing in projects that bridge the state's digital divide and ensure that all Coloradans are able to thrive through access to fast, reliable, and affordable broadband internet. A few more programmatic considerations. Projects must enable work, education, and health monitoring. When you're preparing your applications, please make sure to address all three of these components. These are the components identified by the Treasury and what came out of the guidance that was developed following or during the COVID-19 emergency. Projects must also serve an unserved or underserved population as defined by data speeds. So for unserved populations, that would be an area that has data speeds between 25 download and 3 upload, or excuse me, below that. So below 25 and 3. And then for an underserved population, it would be between 25 download, 3 upload to 100 download, 20 upload. So keep that in mind. Applicants must identify any qualitative or quantitative data to justify the critical need for the project. So the qualitative data would be the anecdotal examples. We heard a lot through the pandemic that there were students that would have to go to our high schools or to their schools to access internet in the parking lot. So that's information that we're looking for, as well as businesses that may not have been able to run credit card transactions due to the number of people that were coming in to shop or using online resources. So make sure that you justify the need for the project. And that goes along with the next component here. Projects must address a critical need exacerbated by the COVID-19 public health emergency. So please let us know how COVID-19 impacted the need for this project in your community. The CPF program will focus on projects that achieve last mile connectivity. Middle mile projects are eligible. However, applicants must have commitments in place to enable last mile service. We want to make sure that those households are being served. So again, we do allow, or the program does allow, middle mile projects, but you just need to have a commitment in place on how that service will be delivered to the household. Also, all grant award winners serving households will be required to participate in the Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP program, in order to offer a low-cost option for high-speed internet access. Applicants must provide project timelines, key performance indicators, and milestones. So keep that in mind when you're developing your project. All of these funds we have to have obligated by December 31st of 2024, and all funds must be spent and projects completed by December 31st of 2026. And again, we hope to have the application available in early 2023. Applicants must outline the project's detail and strategy. CBO is looking for community-driven projects, and so that's really important to us that these projects have the support of the community. So how has the community been engaged? Have project partners or other resources been identified to make the project happen? Is the project included in any other regional, state, or federal plans? We want to know if there's been any planning to date that has taken place to make this project more successful and to ensure that it will be implemented. The applicant must also identify if any other state or federal funds have been applied for or received for the same project. Also, applicants are required to provide a detailed budget breakdown for the project. This includes pre-design, design and engineering, materials and equipment, and consumables, labor, and administrative and project management. So we're not looking for just a lump sum. We want to see how this project will be broken down. Please also note that CBO reserves the right to provide partial awards to those that apply. So keep that in mind when you're developing your budget. Also note that this is a reimbursement program. So that's very important that you have the funds to make sure the project can be implemented because it is reimbursement. And finally, we wanted to note that applicants must be registered in sam.gov and have a unique entity ID in order to apply for these funds. So that will be a requirement, again, when you submit your application. If you've not started that process, please do so immediately. It can take quite a bit of time. So it's really important that if you're not registered in sam.gov, to please do so quickly. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ali Terry to talk about some compliance requirements.
Thanks, Kendall. So just wanted to mention that the Capital Project Fund, CPF, is a federal funding source. And so it was authorized by ARPA, and funding will be awarded via grant agreements. So because these are federal funds, all of the projects are required to follow federal grant management requirements, so federal funding requirements. The overarching federal requirement is 2 CFR 200. We also call it uniform guidance. The terms are used interchangeably. It's the exact same thing. And into CFR 200, if you want to do a little bit of research before you apply for the funds, there is direction around what costs are allowable, what are not, how procurement has to happen, right? So there are requirements around open competition for all federal funds, even for subcontractors, how equipment will be managed, inventoried, insured, used, and then if for any reason during the course of the project you have to dispose or sell any equipment, disposition instructions get a little complicated. We can help you work through that if it comes to that, but it's worth knowing about them in advance. For telecommunications projects, of which this is one, there are a list of prescribed vendors. You can find information about that again in 2 CFR 200, but when you're looking at creating your application budgets, you'll want to make sure that the equipment that you're looking at using is not from those that list of prescribed vendors. Many of you may be familiar with the term, with the company Huawei. It is far more than just Huawei, but it's Huawei and any of their subsidiaries and some additional companies. And so that equipment is often the least expensive equipment, but it can't be used in projects, telecommunication projects that are funded by the federal government. So you want to keep an eye out for that. And then of course, domestic preference, right? So prioritizing American-made products to the extent possible are requirements, and they're all detailed in uniform guidance in 2 CFR 200. 2 CFR 200, in case you're going out to look for it, is a great search term. So you can search 2 CFR 200 domestic preference, and you'll get the regulation. We'll also give additional information about this at a later date. The other things that rules and regulations that will regulate these funds are the award terms and conditions. So when you get your grant agreement from us, there will be a list of special conditions that you'll need to apply for. Generally speaking, there'll be things that are pulled out of 2 CFR 200 that we want to make sure that you are sort of specifically aware of. And then the capital projects funds guidance, and you're able to find that on the web. Again, if you look for capital projects funds, would be your search term, and you'll be able to pull up the guidance from the Treasury. And again, because this is federal funding, the feds dictate what we can and cannot use our money for. So the state can be more restrictive, but never less restrictive than the federal government. So, so you'll find that we have some requirements that are quite inflexible, and those requirements typically come from the federal government. Many of those you can find in that capital projects funds guidance. I think that's it. I'll hand it back.
I will take the slide. Thank you, Ali. As everybody, Kendall, Ali, and Lauren mentioned, there's a lot of considerations to these projects. Technical considerations, we want to make sure that this project is a viable project, and we are able to implement this project, and it will serve the purpose intended. First, we want to start by identifying the project. Is the project a last mile project, middle mile project, or both? And if both, how do I complement each other and connect to each other? How many, this is very important to identify because it's going to help us build a business case for this project. How many unserved or underserved or both households and locations does this project plan to serve? Is the proposed project a fiber optic project or any other type of infrastructure, as in fixed wireless or coax? Also, we want to identify if this project enables end-to-end connectivity. End-to-end connectivity is very critical to these projects. We want to make sure that every household or location that is going to get a fiber connection is able to reach an ISP in order to eliminate any fiber islands that are going to be built but not enabling or extending to any households. Also, we encourage the applicants must specify if the project is new infrastructure or is it an improvement to an existing infrastructure. If there is an existing infrastructure in the area or the planned area for the project, you must demonstrate why that existing infrastructure is not sufficient and cannot be used for your planned project. Also, if the project consists of multiple segments, the applicant or the application should demonstrate connectivity and budget for each segment separately. So if there's a last mile component and then a middle mile component, we'd like to demonstrate and identify the budget for each segment separately. Also, we want to mention that, or we want to know if the applicant has identified an ISP, an internet service provider, the middle mile section, the last mile solution, and full connectivity for the network that it's going to be built. Also, has the applicant identified the equipment materials required for the proposed project? This is going to be very important to identify the materials and all equipment required because that's going to be part of the budget. If you are aware or know what materials you need and the cost for those materials, that's going to be part of the budget. We are going to be looking for detailed budget breakdowns for the project. Materials is going to be one of them, permitting, labor, design and engineering and what have you. And we'd like to see a breakdown for each one of those components of the budget. Will the project provide service that reliably meets or exceeds download speeds of 100 megabits symmetrical? Most fiber connections and most fiber networks are capable of providing such speeds. If not, we want to know why, and is it scalable in the future for such speeds? Also, applicants must include a visual aid showing the project design, identifying the proposed service areas. KMZ files, XML files are preferred. Any other format, similar Visios or what have you, is also acceptable. But to provide an overall view of the network topology and type of network is going to be very, very critical. And also, we stress that the KMZ or XML files are encouraged because we can layer those into multiple or different GIS systems. That's pretty much most of, or the most important technical considerations to have ready for your application when it comes. For any questions or concerns from now until these projects are awarded, you can reach to Kendall Kramer for any programmatic or policy questions or concerns. And we've also divided the regions into 2 sections. I will be handling regions 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 4. And Michael Murphy will be handling the rest of the regions with 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So if you know your region, the person assigned to that region will be your point of contact. You've probably already received communications from one of us via email or phone call or both, and we probably already chatted. But if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to any one of us as needed. With that, I will return it back to Lauren.
Thank you. I am dropping that region map into the chat, by the way, just in case anyone is wondering where they are, what region they're in. So look for that to come. We also wanted to mention there are additional funding opportunities for broadband available outside of CPF. These, many of them are federal programs. So, but we just want to make sure that everyone is aware of other resources. The USDA has a program called Reconnect that is specifically designed for rural communities. And then our partners over at DOLA have a wonderful list of all broadband grant programs and loan programs that are available on this DOLA link here. It's a great resource if you're just curious about or looking for a summary of everything that's out there. Like I said, we will post these slides so you will have access to these links after the call. One other thing we wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of, we, like I said earlier, understand how important it is for us to be talking to all of our stakeholders in this broadband expansion, because it takes partnership and it will take all of us to accomplish this goal. So we have set up a series of roundtables, which are your opportunity to meet with us on a regular basis and bring questions, comments, concerns, just open conversation with the Colorado Broadband Office around broadband expansion, broadband grants. We've divided it up for our two different groups. The first one's for industry partners, for internet service providers and anyone else who might be involved in the actual build out and providing service to subscribers. So that will start next week on September 20th. That's the first of those calls. And then we have another call for our community leaders, which this is really anybody that is not a provider. So municipalities or counties, schools, libraries, first responders, public safety officials, anybody who really does not fall into the industry category. This is your opportunity to join us and ask your questions. We understand that there's a lot of communities and towns and groups that really just have never done this before. And so this is your opportunity to come and get some resources and just ask your questions. All of that is available on the Advance Broadband website for links and when those calls are and to go register. So again, we will follow up with that information. And at this time, we can open up the forum for questions. So you can either chat your question and I will read it, or feel free to raise your hand and ask your question on camera if you would like to do that as well. So we will take questions at this time. And I see Zoe has her hand up. Zoe, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So I'm curious to know, is there a preference for fiber networks compared to other networks for middle mile infrastructure? And if so, why?
Someone on our team want to take that?
I can take that. Yes, there is a preference for fiber. Fiber is very reliable and scalable. If you're thinking of fixed wireless or microwave, those are considerations as well. But the preference and the industry right now is going towards fiber in particular, due to the reliability and scalability.
And so I'd also add that the funding source prioritizes it as well.
That's interesting you said that, Allison. That's been a common thing that's been said about that.
Yeah, so in most of the broadband programs that the feds are putting out, they're prioritizing fiber. And so the bar is fairly high to use a system other than fiber.
Interesting, interesting. Thank you both.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to Stacy. Do you want to ask your question?
I do. Thank you. So this is probably just going to be a very simple go, no go. I was hired on to the city of Longmont as a grant coordinator at the end of July, and we have missed the LOI round. So we are not even sure. I'm asking if we can still apply when things come out if we haven't presented an LOI to you yet.
I can take that. Yes, you can. We want to make very clear that the LOI process was not required. You did not have to submit an LOI in order to apply for these funds. The LOI process just gave CBO a high-level understanding of the projects that were out there in order for us to be aware of those. So certainly, yes, you are able to apply. You did not have to submit an LOI.
I thought it was farther projected, so thank you. That put me at ease. And also, we are a unique entity in that we are a municipality, but we're also a provider, internet service provider. So for those two webinars that you had, do you believe that it would probably be best, in our best interest to be a part of both? And then I'll let you go.
Yeah, I would certainly encourage you to be part of both of those webinars to see if there's useful information for you that could be applicable to you. Yeah, so certainly we'd welcome you to join those.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move to Thomas Johnson. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Thomas Johnson, Grand County. Grand County government doesn't supply internet services, but we have private entities do. What's that? Can you talk a little bit about how you validate support of the community? And I assume this grant funding is for those that actually supply internet services like private companies.
Yeah, so I can take part of that question. So showing the support of the community, if you've done any type of planning, whether that be preparing a broadband plan, a comprehensive plan, even just hearing from local residents about the service, if you have those documented, that's the sort of thing that we want to hear. And of course, again, because these funds were provided as a result of COVID-19, the pandemic, it's important that you address how these funds will farther enable that work, education, and health monitoring, so telehealth. So we really want to hear the story of, how will this help students achieve academic outcomes? How will this prepare your workforce and strengthen your economy? And how will it benefit the health industry in your community, the doctors, the medical clinics? Will they be able to provide telehealth? So any documentation you have of that, we could also say, or I should also say, if you can get letters of support from folks that might need that service, or can say, yeah, if I had high-speed internet, I could do my job better. I could, achieve better academic outcomes. Yes, please certainly provide that.
Great. So if there's a interested internet service provider, the county government can work with them to get letters of support, but the county is not applying for the grant. The internet service provider is applying for the grant, right?
It can be, it can either be the internet service provider or the county. I would say if it's the internet service provider, then they would want to demonstrate that they've been working with the county, and the county would want to show their support for that project to show that that the county has confidence in them, that they're going to be able to implement this project. But it could be either one that can apply. But just showing that the community is working together and has this shared vision is very important.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that answer, Kendall. I've got a question. Zoe, I see your hand up, but I have a question I'm going to read really quick on the chat that also I think goes to your first question. Beth Luther said, back to Zoe's question on fiber. Does the federal grant program have a preference between buried fiber and aerial fiber on telephone poles? And if someone on our team, go ahead, Ali.
No, actually, fiber is fiber. The preferred method is buried fiber, but in a lot of areas, no, buried is not feasible. So aerial fiber and partnerships or agreements with pole owners are encouraged and considered, and fiber is fiber. You bury it is fine, aerial is fine as well.
All
I
right.
think I just want to add one thing. We don't want to get into the aerial section where there's a lot of pole replacements and a lot of infrastructure that needs to happen, and spend a lot of these funds on changing poles or changing the infrastructure of the pole. The high cost of that might be a factor. But aerial or buried, they're both considered.
Thanks, Ali. Perfect. Zoe, I see you put your hand back down. Do you still have a question, or was that?
No, I do. I
Oh,
have
great.
another
Okay.
one.
All right. Why don't you go ahead? Go ahead with your question.
Okay. So I wanted to know if there will be direct recommendations for companies to buy US made supplies, since I guess like the Build America, Buy America requirements apply for this funding, I'm assuming, or I shouldn't assume. Let you decide.
I can speak to that unless somebody else wants to. So Build America, Buy America doesn't apply to CPF. It is going to apply to the next funding source, or the next round of funding that's going to come out. It applies to BEAD, but domestic preference still does, right? So domestic preference is a less formal version of Build America, Buy America. So it requires that programs, that recipient agencies do their best to source materials domestically, so from manufacturers, and there's a documentation requirement around that. It's similar but not as rigorous as Build America, Buy Build America, Buy American. So it's not as rigorous. It doesn't require a formal waiver, but it does require documentation that will need to be submitted to our team during compliance monitoring. So it's a great question. We don't have a list of preferred vendors at this point, but I have heard that there's some conversations that are happening at the national level around, how do we really help programs and subrecipient agencies be proactive and meet those requirements in a way that's a little bit easier and has a little bit less administrative burden. Right now, they haven't come up with anything that I know of, and I don't think the state has anything at this point either. But they're working on it, so hopefully we'll have something before January.
Sounds good. Thank you.
That's a great question.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say all these questions help us just understand what it is we need to be telling you. So this is great. Please feel free to ask questions, anything that's on your mind. I'm going to go to a question in the chat from Jason Green. He asks, is the Capital Projects Fund grant application expected in January timeframe? So I will answer that. We are still saying this grant application process will be open to taking grants in early 2023. We do not have a definitive date or even month at this time, but we are shooting for 2023. There's a series of things that we have to go through as an office, submitting our plan to Treasury and that kind of stuff that we need to get approval on before we can set any dates. So yeah, still expect early 2023. All right, let's see, Thomas, I see your hand is up. Do you have another question, or did you just not lower it from the last question?
I didn't lower it.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, I'll go to the next question from Craig. Will the CPF program have a Treasury rep assigned to Colorado, similar to NTIA's for the BEAD program? Ali, Terry, do you know the answer to that question?
I do.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we do have a Treasury representative assigned to Colorado. And we work with her on a weekly basis at this point, and we'll continue to work with this person Her name is Dana McKenzie, and she's our treasury rep for capital projects.
Great, thank you, Brandy. Okay, I actually do not see any additional questions in the chat. Oh, Craig, you raised your hand. Would you like to follow up I think that was your chat question, wasn't it?
Yeah, not a follow-up, maybe a different one. How do we think about inflation when you're thinking about costing these projects going forward? I just saw a 30 to 40% year over year for 2021 for a basket of fiber goods from the distributors, and that was published by Fiber Broadband Association type of number. And that's kind of a huge number, all right? And so if you're raising 30% annually and you do your project, and by the time you get funding and build it, and now you're 2 periods past, you're out of money. So how do you think about that when you're thinking about, putting these projects together?
I'm being
Ally.
quiet to see if anyone else wants to take that one. I'm happy to take it, but
I can take it. So inflation is obviously an issue for these projects, and I would say even the quotes that we received through the LOI process are probably different today in terms of budget. So I think when you're putting your proposals together, I would add, I would increase your contingency. Make sure that what you're being quoted is I would be working with vendors, ISPs, really understanding what it costs to build these networks, and add contingency to it. Because I know how it is, you get a grant, and this has happened to me before, where the price was the price when the application was submitted, and then I go out to bid, do my contracts, and it increased 20%. So just make sure you're really conservative in your proposals, so that you have what you need going forward. It's much easier to overshoot and then give back some money than it is to undershoot and have to go ask us for more money, because it'll be difficult for us to find extra dollars if you are off. Now we might, the CBO program will likely hold some money for those types of scenarios, because we want to make sure these projects get built. But just if you can help us on your end, just be conservative in your estimations.
and I would add to a reminder to in your budget narrative, when you're doing what Brandy is talking about, just to make sure that you note that you did it in your budget narrative. So when we're comparing applications, it doesn't look like one program is significantly higher cost than another.
That's good advice. Thank you. And then on the FCC broadband data collection maps, what is the role, the timing of those, when you think about demonstrating need? CPF has the remote work, remote healthcare, remote education, and the need side of that, versus specifically for speeds. But then there's this implied need side where you can't get those things done unless it's fast enough. And then there's a challenge process where you push back on that. So, how do you think about the role of those, maps and the timing of those?
So I believe Megan is on our call, who leads our maps team, or Brandy, I don't know if you'd like to take that question.
What was the question? How our maps play a role in the timing of funding?
Yeah, like CPF is needs based, and you have to demonstrate the need to do it. But then there's a component of it that is related to speed, though not direct. But it feels like people will go back to whatever maps available, and if the broadband data collection maps are available, that'll be the map of record, and it will be much more accurate than we have today. So, is it a matter where we just wait to get those, and then you figure out that supporting speed part of the need, and that whole timing?
Yeah, the timing of our maps, we're working on them right now. So the timing is actually pretty good. So we just onboarded our mapping consultant. They're working with us as we speak to get to location level data, which will include speeds, performance. So those will be available around the same time we open up the application process. So and before we'll put communication out when those are ready. I think we'll have a pretty good idea where we are in the mapping over the next 2 months. So, you know, in those stakeholder roundtables that we have, we'll be communicating a lot about that stuff. So there'll be plenty of time for you to look at our new and improved maps in the development of your applications for CPF next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Craig. At this time, I don't see any other questions on the chat or hands raised. Does anybody else have questions? We do have about 15 minutes left. Oh, okay, Zoe, go ahead with your question.
I'm sorry, just one more. I'm curious. Will there be federally imposed speed tests and mapping? And what will that look like? Did that question make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I can answer part of that, and maybe Ali, Terry can maybe chime in. There is a compliance part of it that, you know, you will have to do. There will have to be speed tests that are done following the completion of the project to ensure that those speed tests are, you know, accurate and reliable. So I can say that. Maybe I could, Ali, could you expand upon that maybe?
Yeah, so I was going to say something similar, Kendall, thanks. So the feds require reporting. I will say they don't, typically the feds don't tell us how we have to do something, they tell us what we have to do. And so they tell us that we have to meet specific speed requirements. And so you know, the state of Colorado is responsible for making sure that any of the projects that we fund and the results that we get actually meet those requirements. So for these programs, it's 100 up, 100 down, generally speaking. In some cases, 100 up, 100 down, 20 up is allowable, although it's as long as it's scalable. So so we will depend on our subrecipient agencies both to report their numbers, but then also to verify their numbers. So the feds don't necessarily tell us that you have to have a speed test, but functionally, you're likely going to have to plan for documentation of the completion of the successful completion of your project to the specifications required by the feds. So that's like a nothing answer, but generally speaking, it's kind of a yes. Right, so you should be planning on making sure that you can clearly document that the projects that you've accomplished meet the federal requirements, and speed tests will be a part of that.
Thank you.
And I can add one more thing, that it's speed tests are going to be a requirement as a part of the closeout package for that for the project. I think there will be like 6 months after the project is complete interval where we'll be requesting speed tests from the number of subscribers and then a percentage of those subscribers having speed tests.
Thanks, Ali. And Zoe, we love the questions, so keep them coming.
Oh, no problem.
We have another question on the chat from Chrissy Crozier. Her question is, the community I'm working with already started broadband service through their municipal utility. The timing is such they would like to complete this project in 2024. Will this be possible with your timeline? Someone on our team want to take that?
So I'll let someone else sort of speak to the actual timeline of the CPF project. I think one of the things that I would mention is that this funding source, for any federal funding source, the expenses have to occur within the period of performance. And so the period of performance for this project will be from the execution date of the grant agreement, which, and I would maybe make a nod to program staff in terms of when they think executions of grant agreements would happen. But just as a reminder, you wouldn't be able to be reimbursed for costs that were incurred prior to the execution date of that. So for example, if your grant agreement was executed on June 30th of 2023, any cost before June 30th of 2023 would need to be paid by another source. Costs that happen after June 30th, 2023 could potentially be paid by the grant if it were approved, if they were approved line items in your budget. And there's some other sort of technicalities around that, but generally speaking, that's the case. And so I just don't want to make, they may be in the middle of a project, but the costs prior to the execution of the grant agreement would need to be funded by another source, sort of regardless of completion date. And then I'll let the program staff speak to, timeline markers maybe.
Yeah, I would say that we're still working on developing the overall timeline. Of course, we have our application that will be available in early 2023. I can't say for certain when you would receive, if you're awarded, when you would receive a contract, but I would anticipate that you would have most likely enough time to complete a project in depending on the magnitude of the project as well, in 2024. But again, like Ali said, you can't spend or any of those costs that are incurred prior to a signed contract could not be reimbursed. So as soon as we have more information on that timeline, we'll make sure to put it out on our website and share it with our communities and interested parties.
All right, thanks, guys. Craig, you have your hand up again. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, Ali, a Region 2 question for you. Are there any CPF specific right-of-way programs to ease road right-of-way, pole attach, ditch, railroad, that we're working on for this? Just maybe call it one-stop shopping. But right now, for ditch, you have to go through a lot of hoops to figure out the who and the where and the what. Do you think there'll be any consolidated programs to onboard all those folks to make it a little bit easier?
I'm not aware of any project. CDOT maybe, but I'm not aware of any other right away, facilitating any right away issue. But CDOT is something that we're working with, or an entity that we're working with. But other than that, I'm not aware of at this time.
Is that in scope, or is that something we can work on? So, they hear it from you first, not necessarily from all the providers or applicants.
Not sure how to answer that, to be honest with you. Kindle, do you know?
I think that might be a question. I think Brandy had to jump off a little early, but I think that's something we can talk with Brandy about. Again, the primary right-of-way entity that we're working with is CDOT. And so there really isn't an entity or a project currently at the moment for other right-of-way entities, to facilitate that. It's certainly a concern that we can bring up to Brandy and let you know what we hear back.
Nothing is specific in Region 2 that I am aware of, but any and all partnerships are encouraged for that. But if I know or anything comes across my desk, I will definitely let you know, Craig.
Okay, thank you.
And question on the phone?
Yeah, go ahead.
So a lot of the municipalities will charge permitting fees that are pretty exorbitant. Are you folks using your clout to get beneficial treatment in the situation for broadband that we'd all be deploying to get those fees lowered?
I don't know. Yeah, let me know if this is a Brandy question, team, or if you guys can take a stab at that one.
Yeah, I think that's a Brandy question. And I'm not certain how much clout we might have to impact the fees that municipalities or others are charging, but that's certainly a good question for Brandy.
Hey, Lauren, this
Yeah.
is Mark Colwell. I'm the senior manager of broadband programs, and Brandy and I have talked about what a couple other states are doing, what's known as a broadband ready program, essentially coming up with some policies or model ordinance that would make it easy to deploy. And of course, we've got to balance the rights and the considerations of local communities with the need to get broadband places. But this is something we're looking into, and it would involve things potentially like application fees, single point of contact, and so forth. So if we've got some developments, we'll surely be talking about that as we host our engagement, the community engagement call and the ISD engagement call.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to move to a question on the chat. And this question, Megan, if you are on the call, Megan Gerner, this is a map question. The question is, for the roundtable discussion on the 20th and 21st, will CBO be discussing the challenge process requirements for current ISPs? And Kai, I'm assuming you mean the FCC map challenge process.
I've been seeing chatter out in the world about like requirements for challenging the maps because they just got all of the 477 data. And so for Colorado specifically, I was wondering, and I know it's not specific to capital funds, so I apologize, but if it will be addressed at the roundtable.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Megan.
This is Megan Gernert. Yes, we can definitely talk about the challenge process at the roundtables next week. If you do have specific questions about the challenge process, it would be helpful to know what those are, and you can email us at oit_broadband@state.co.us with any of those questions, and that way we can come a little bit more prepared.
Okay.
But that definitely is a hot topic, so
we all want to know.
Discuss it then.
Most definitely. Thank you, Megan. I will make sure that I am attending and I send in questions prior to that event.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. That we did plan to discuss hot topics during those roundtables. That's a good time to bring stuff like that. Thanks, Megan, for putting that email in the chat. So yeah, any questions that you might have leading up to that, that's a great idea, Megan. Email those to that email, and then that way we can do a little research before those roundtables. Okay, I thought I saw another hand up. Zoe, did you have another question? I don't know if you put it down.
I did. One of them was about the challenge process, and another question is about, would this middle mile project have the potential to become a cooperative if the project decided to work with other ISPs?
Programs team, are you able to answer that question?
Ali, do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I want to say yes. Again,
yes.
These type of partnerships are encouraged. Just to expand every entity's reach and clout, these middle mile projects with another ISP that can't reach certain areas, such partnerships are extremely encouraged.
All right, thank you for answering that, guys. I do not see any other questions at this time. Does anybody else have any additional questions, either that you'd like to chat or raise your hand and ask? Okay, then we will end about 3 minutes early. Like I said, we will follow up with answers to some of these questions, the slide deck, contact information. We'll do a thorough follow-up so everyone has this information. And then just another reminder, join us for those roundtables that are next week if you have just more general questions. But we appreciate everybody attending, and have the best rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you.